All right, well, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to turn this into this using all of this. You're going to need all kinds of stuff. Dehydrator, little mats, blenders, little itty bitty whiskers. You're going to need a bowl, vacuum packers, and a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so let's get started. And we're going to do this step by step by step by step so that you can go ahead and get all this stuff. And like I said, you can turn these into something that lasts 10 years. And this is only going to be half of what's in here because this is 2 dozen. So anyway, hope you guys enjoy and make sure you watch the whole video. Okay, well, as you can see, you go ahead and crack your 1 or 2 dozen, whatever you can fit in your dehydrator on your fruit trays. These are good for fruit leathers and everything else in your food dehydrators. So you kind of judge what you can manage in your dehydrator. We're going to do 1 dozen. We can normally fit 2, but for the sake of time, we're going to do 1. So once they're all cracked in, whether you want to do this into 1 bowl and then into your main bowl, depending on whether you have a rooster in your flock and you're iffy about eggs, regardless, you get them all cracked up in here, and then you take your whisker, whether you're going to use an electric or not. We live in a bus, so honestly, you just, with the old school one, and you beat these really, 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 really well. I mean, you really got to mix these really well so that they don't separate. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that, and then we'll clip back in and I'll explain the next process. All right, well, I've got these whipped up really well. It's usually, what, honey, about a minute and a half when you did them last time?
Minute and a half to 2 minutes.
I always have a hard time remembering. About a minute and a half to 2 minutes. So it's a good thing I have my wife, otherwise I'd kind of not really remember this recipe too well. But anyway, they got to be nice and frothy and mixed very well. That way you know you really beat them really well. So the next step, honey, if you want to help me with this. This is the fun part. I'm going to go ahead and move this. This is the finished product, by the way, if you saw my short.
So I don't know about the fun part. It's a little messy. So I found it's easiest if you use a measuring cup in order to transfer your egg mix into your dehydrator. My dehydrator has 4 trays. You can hold 6 eggs per tray once they're mixed before you start your dehydrating process. These silicone mats you can order online pretty much anywhere, but as my husband said, a lot of people buy them if they're making the fruit leathers. You need these if you're dehydrating eggs so that they're not falling off your trays, because if you've had dehydrators before, the trays are empty on the bottom. A lot of people use these to do jerky and stuff like that. So order your silicone trays. They come in packs of 4 all the way up to 16, so depending on your needs, go ahead and do that. So I like to use my measuring cup. It works a little better and helps to control some of the mess. But what we're going to do is take the egg mixture and divide it in between these 2 silicone mats. Oh, and it actually looks like I've got some extra trays in here that we don't need. So before I go making a bigger mess, we'll take that one out and use just what we need here.
Well, we're really only going to need 2 trays, right?
Yes, I didn't realize you'd brought off 4 of them.
I just grabbed the whole unit.
It's okay. This was me not paying attention. That happens sometimes.
Oh, are we even on a level surface?
I am going to say that we are mostly on a level surface. I know that's important.
Almost. Okay. You got to be perfectly level or as level as you can possibly get, otherwise this does not work evenly. That's very important to remember. I'm going to go see if I have any more coffee left.
Okay. Coffee is necessary.
Hey, I got half a mug. That's awesome.
in the bus world, everybody has their luxuries. The Keurig is definitely ours.
I think that's good enough.
Yep.
So we're maxed on that tray. So let's find a good one.
Make sure it's not the one with the handle.
Not the one with the handle.
Yes.
Okay.
These guys have to sit on top of each other. And so the one with the handle will go after this one if we end up needing it.
All right. If you've never used a food dehydrator before with any of these trays, there's a ring in here that it sets into just right, and there's a raised ring in the middle. Now, depending on which layer you're using, that one has an inner ring that you have to kind of recess into on the outside. This one not so much, but you really want to pay attention to stuff like that if you're using these.
And so I
Well-
just had a little bit of mixture left, so I'll go ahead and scramble these up either for us or for the chickens to eat later. Again, depending on your egg size, you might find that you need that third tray. I usually do 2 dozen, but I usually use my entire dehydrator. So again, as my husband said, for time's sake, we're going to stick with a dozen. So we're going to turn these on in the dehydrator. They're going to take roughly 18 hours before they are done.
Yeah, they take a long time.
And you will want to make sure that you're rotating your trays, especially if you're doing a full stack, because you'll notice as they're drying, they'll get crispy around the edges, but they'll have liquid more towards the middle. So you'll have to rotate your trays out about every 3 to 4 hours while you're going through that process. And we'll check in on these as we're going through them so you can kind of see what to look for as you are dehydrating your eggs if you're going to try to do this yourself.
Yep, this one's going to be a long video. This one's going to take a little over a day to make, so if you're really interested, you're really going to want to watch this entire video from beginning to end and not skip anything, because the stuff that's not important will be in a time lapse. The stuff that is important, obviously, we're going to be telling you about, right? So we're going to cap these, get them started, and that'll be about it for the day until we go get ready to check on them. Right, babe?
Yep. So
All
we'll
right.
be back with some product later.
Yep, so we'll see you a little bit later on. In the next clip, anyway. Okay, she's running. We just fired it up, so here we go. We'll keep you posted. Okay, well, we've had the dehydrator going for a little over an hour. We're running 2 trays, so this is a much faster process than it would be with 4 trays, but then again, it always varies. Climates, environment, humidity factors. A lot of things come into play when you're using dehydrators. If you have 2 trays, you're not going to be able to rotate depending on the food dehydrator setup you've got. This one, we're not going to be able to rotate trays. If we were doing the full 2 dozen, we would have the 4 trays and we would be able to rotate efficiently. But in the meantime, this is what you're going to want to start seeing, and this will let you know that you're actually starting the process to get where you want to go. So if you want to go ahead and come on in, I'll show you what this looks like. You kind of want this like kind of icky, crusty, gooey kind of consistency that's starting to develop with the eggs right here. And so that's the top layer, and it does vary between layers on these machines, which is why it's extremely important to really pay attention to the different trays, because if you look at that tray right there, it's a totally different story. And depending on whether you're level or not will depend on whether you need to actually level your trays or spin your trays. As you can see up on the upper half over here, there isn't that many, and there's a whole bunch right here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to match that with this tray right here, and I'm going to set it down and make sure that it stays nice and level as much as possible. Before I go spinning the whole thing, I'm going to make sure that it seats the way it's supposed to on this rim. And then now that I got this set, I'm going to go ahead and rotate that 180 degrees because I'm not quite level, and that's going to allow the egg material to come all the way down where it needs to, and it'll balance it all out. So once this gets a little bit farther along, I'll clip back in, and then we'll start getting into the next processes once this one's complete. So we'll be right back. Okay, well, it's been dehydrating for a day and it's completely done, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. You really want to get this really crusty, dry consistency in these things, okay? Basically like chips. If you pick a small piece up and it crumbles like a cracker, you did it right and it's ready, okay? So now it gets a little bit technical because you really don't want to lose any of this. So my wife is going to help me out with this because this is a very delicate process and it takes a little while. Basically what you're going to need is you're going to need a small blender. In this case I have a little itty bitty Magic Bullet with the blender cap on it. And then you're going to need a bowl. I'm going to use a paper bowl. This is kind of like a wax coat paper bowl, so it's easy for the flakes to come out of this once it's been blended. So you take this and you drop it into the bowl without losing any of it, and you do a little bit at a time, and then you throw it in the blender and you blend it into a powder for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, honey?
2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. And I never timed it. She actually timed it. I actually never timed the process. I just looked at it and was like, oh yeah, that's good. You know, that's just how we roll, you know. But anyway, you'll do that, and then once you're done blending it, then we'll move on to the next process. But I'm going to go ahead and time lapse all this. That way you can go ahead and see the process that we're doing. I just figured I'd let you know what it is before we get started on it. That way you're not like, what's he doing? All right. So I'll be right back. Okay, in case you were wondering what we just did, we grab the tray, my wife grabs it on one side, and then I come out and I grab it on the other side so that we have 4 corners of the round tray, and then we just basically shake it through the middle like this.
And if you're doing it by yourself and you need an easier way, you can always line your counter with wax paper too, so anything that you drop you can make easy cleanup of. Being in a bus, I don't have a habit of keeping wax paper on me, so if you're, have a better kitchen situation, that's just a little tip for you.
Yeah, it does help, or like a sheet pan or something like that. Putting this in a sheet pan and then getting it all together would really help really well too. So, but we grab it like this, bring it up nice and gently till it's over the bowl, and then fold it up. Basically like, tortilla, kind of roll it all up so that it all falls through the hole in the middle. And then once the majority is out, you can go ahead and shake it like that over the bowl, and then you're good to go. Now we're on to the next process, which is the blending. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the time lapse so you can check that out. And then once we have it to the consistency that we need it, we're going to go ahead and pop back in and show you what that looks like. And then we'll bring on the next step. So we'll be right back. Okay, so I know this is going to be a little hard to see, but you see that consistency of that right there? That's not quite what you want, okay? So when it looks like this, you think you're going to be done, but you're not. We're going to keep going. Okay, well, I'm done blending that, and as you can see, it was a very involved process. You actually have to take it out, clean the blender, put it back in, blend it again, and you have to make sure it doesn't get too hot too, because if it gets too hot in there, then it messes up your whole batch. But honestly, what you're going for is you're going for something that has the consistency of sand. Okay? You literally want the consistency of sand when you're doing this, that you blend it down to as small as grain you can in 2 minutes. It should look like yellow sand. My wife likes to call it yellow kinetic sand. But yeah, you pretty much do that, and then now you're on to vacuum packing. So you pull out your vacuum sealer and your bags and load them up and go ahead and vacuum seal them. So we're gonna go ahead and get that set up, and then kind of show you what we do when we set them up in a vacuum sealer. They're a little bit interesting. Sometimes people are a little bit iffy about vacuum sealing powders and stuff. So I'll be right back. Okay, well, I got the vacuum packer all set up, and I've got a bag right here. Now I'm just gonna basically only need one bag. Usually you can put, I think, yeah, probably 2 dozen in one of these little bags right here. Usually do 2 dozen at a time. I mean, I don't think you're really gonna need to crack open more than that if you're vacuum packing this stuff. So just make sure that you try not to spill as much as possible. That way your measurements are actually accurate when you do this, when you go back to remix it. And when it comes to vacuum sealer, food savers, stuff like that, a lot of people are iffy on powders and stuff because they're like, you know, a lot of people are iffy on liquids and stuff. And honestly, I like to flatten it all out so that it doesn't have too many air pockets to fight. Most people will leave it clumped up in the bottom down here. I personally don't like to do that because then it smashes it all into a brick and it doesn't really help. If you fan it out like this, it usually helps out a lot better. And I'll puff it just like that so that it's nice and flat in my hand. And if you notice, I still have quite a bit folded up underneath. That's going to go into the vacuum sealer. Just replace the seal, by the way. We had to get a new seal for this thing. That way, hopefully, it'll work without having to press on the top. But we're going to find out. But in the meantime, while I'm getting this set up, honey, if you want to tell them what the measurements are.
Sure. We'll hop in on the other side of you.
That way, when you guys get ready to rehydrate this or use it, after you open it, you're not in the dark on what your ratios are.
Yep. So a good rule of thumb is always to label your bags. So I always write on it that it's powdered eggs. I also put the date of when I seal these. So these will keep and maintain their fresh flavor for 5 to 10 years. So you have to take into consideration where you're at, your climate, humidity, etc. I know they make little packets to keep the moisture out of your food storage. So that would be something that would prolong the shelf life of these. But it's 2 parts water to 1 part egg. So if you're using a tablespoon of powdered egg, you're going to mix 2 tablespoons of water to that, and that equals 1 egg. So you can mix this up and use it for scrambled eggs and omelets. And if you're using this for baking, you don't have to pre-mix it when you add it to your cake mix. You can add a tablespoon of this and 2 tablespoons of water for 1 egg in your cake mix, and you don't have to pre-mix that because you're mixing your cake mix when you're done. So it's a good way to do that.
And I gotta be honest, we've done this and then remade them as scrambled eggs. And I mean, honestly, if you want a really good comparison, at the worst case scenario, it's like the easy egg out of the carton. Okay? Worst case scenario.
Farm fresh flavor though.
Yeah, but with farm fresh flavor regardless. Anyway, let's check out and see if this new gasket works. I like to hold this to make sure that it stays flat. Let's see, vacuum seal. I think we're gonna have to change the upper seal. Yep. Gonna have to change the upper seal.
There you go. We didn't even have to stop it.
Nope, but we're gonna have to change the upper seal.
On the plus side, the seal came in a 4-pack, so we can do that and still have 2 extras.
Right.
All right.
Okay, now that's done. Now the great thing about the Food Saver Game Saver that we have, like most other ones, is they go ahead and seal it, but this is what you get out of the finished product right there. And that is super thin. I mean, you can throw I mean, if you really wanted to get serious about it, you could probably throw about 500 of these in a filing cabinet. Just for the sake of like how the storage is. I mean, look at this. This is like super, super thin. There's nothing to it. This is 1 dozen. You sure this was 2 dozen?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's 2 dozen that didn't get flattened out right. So, yeah. If this was a little bit flatter, it would be double of this. But yeah, that's basically what it turns out like. So, if you got any questions, go ahead and let me know by leaving them in the comments below. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and get this marked now that I went ahead and made another one. That way I don't lose track of when it was processed and packaged. Get all the rest of the stuff packed up and move on to the next project. So, you guys take care. I will see you next time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're interested. Share this video with a friend if you liked it, and leave a like on it if you did. That way I know. All right? And hit that notification bell. That way you get all of the videos that I launch. And I'll see you guys next time. You take care and have a good night.